Let's stay in the culture discussion. Amir, you had something that you told me that really caught my attention. I always felt that this role of being VP of engineering is the loneliest role in the planet. It's because you have your CEO saying, hey, what's up with the features? When are they coming? You have your developers that, they just, we're not building things right. We're not investing in technical depth. And you need to bridge between the business to that language and speak. But you, and I always felt that was the loneliest role, but you came with a super interesting approach or insight where you said, hey, it doesn't have to be that lonely. I can, I don't know how you phrase it exactly, but I can extract energy back from my team.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that because it's really interesting.
I phrase it to myself as you need to find consolation in your team. Because as you said, I think engineering leadership can and will be lonely for everyone practicing it because it's this is the job. Okay, as you said, you need to bridge two worlds to two very different audiences. One is very business oriented, one is very tech oriented. They don't usually interconnect very well, so you need to be this bridge. And sometimes you get stuck in the middle in all the loneliness. But what I've found to work here is just find this consolation in those interactions with your team. I think some people think that being an engineering leader or a leader mainly means that you give away but you don't get back. But I think that just like parenting, okay, the truth is that you get a lot back. Okay,
yes.
Like watching as a parent, watching your child speak the first words or walk the first steps, it fulfills you with so much happiness and energy. So you're not only giving here, okay? So yes. I think the same goes, and the same is true also for being an engineering leader. And as I said before, there are those moments that are saved only for you as an engineering leader to see your team flourish. And I personally took a lot of my power, energy to continue from those moments, from this consolation, from my team and from those talks and from this really personal attachment that I got with my team. It worked for me.
Now that you're saying it, makes perfect sense because I keep thinking that every time I have a bad day here in LinearB, this customer, gave up, they went with a competitor or we lost the deal, which doesn't happen a lot. I'm going to speak to the developer. Hey, what are we building? Show me, what? And all of a sudden, I feel like my batteries are recharged again, and those comments. So definitely,
it's like giving the hug to your child after a hard day at work.
I think it's also really important to require from the engineers to understand the business context. You can never be alone as a manager with the business context. The engineers have to have the business context, and they need to be able to understand if we didn't build it right. Right? There's this thing that engineers really love. So be able to convince the product that you really need to do it. It has to have a business value. Otherwise, it is not justified.
Do you put them on the calls with customers, at least as listeners?
Yeah. Calls with customers, support, and of course, constant communication with product where they need to argue their case. And it's a culture and an education of both sides. But they get it. Yeah. So it has to be either error prone. I mean, it's buggy. It means that if we release it now, there would be bugs after the release. They say the product don't agree, they release, and there are bugs. Next time they say it, the product understands. They will not release it buggy. Yeah. Then the communication becomes better. There's a performance issue. We will not be able to support more than 40 customers in parallel. Is that okay? It's not okay. We need to fix it. But if it is okay, then it's okay. It's a business decision. And I think that when the dialogue is the right dialogue, then the engineers are actually responsible to take the right decisions.
Yeah, that's the dream scenario. But it's tough.
It's like a child. You
it's
have
not
to
always
require that.
Yeah.
Right? They obviously don't want to know. They just want to do a perfect job that takes forever. No, I'm kidding. It's not true. But
It's also important for
when they are
product
responsible,
teams
they
to
take very good decisions,
I agree with
right?
I agree. It's also important for the product teams to understand, like what you said about convincing the product managers, right? That it's important to do, for example, some sort of refactoring.
Yes.
So from my perspective, when my engineers want to do like a 1 month refactoring, I tell them, okay, you need to convince the product manager, like that the roadmap of the product is going to be delayed much more if you won't do the refactoring right now. So it's actually becoming a business decision, right? So they need to speak not in engineering words, right? But say, oh, I've looked at the roadmap. The roadmap says that we're going to deal with this piece of code like 10 times in the next 3 months, and it's going to take us 3 months just to finish with these features. But we can just do 1 month of refactoring, and then it will take us a week to accomplish all these tasks. So it's becoming like a business decision and require business understanding from the engineering teams, although they don't even always understand that it's like a business decision, right? But they need to communicate it to other stakeholders.
Makes sense. You also have like, or at least had until recently, a unique structure, right? Where I think like the product owners or like the head of departments, and how does that work? Like,
yeah, so it was weird. Like every time I talked about it, like people looked at me and like said, "What?" But you know, it works, so you can't really argue with that. So until like a few months ago, actually, as the company grew from the get-go, we had product managers managing the engineering teams. We didn't have this role of engineering manager, right? So the product managers who were engineers in the past, so that's maybe why it worked. They managed the engineers, and it was really interesting because all the things when I went to VP R&D forums and CTOs, they were talking about this interaction between the tech department and the product department and how they don't agree with each other and need to communicate, and there are communication issues and so on. And I didn't really understand what they're talking about, right? Because we had a product manager. The product manager built a strategy for the product and the roadmap, and then he executed it. So there were no chances for gaps to exist in such configuration. But as our engineering teams grew and as our product team grew, we had much more engineers in every team, and eventually the product managers became really invested in the tactical management of the engineers. So they didn't have enough time to invest in product roadmap, competitor research, and building great experience for users. And so this was one problem. The other is that we made a switch in our roadmap to have more horizontal projects that's across multiple apps. And because we had this structure of business units, it became really hard to push horizontal activities across the different products because every team was very independent. And it was really hard to gather resources to do these shared projects. It was really important for us to, for example, unify the apps, make them feel the same, and build a platform and so on. So eventually we went to a more traditional structure where I'm right now leading all the engineers and the researchers, and we have a chief product who was one of our division managers and the product manager who now manages the entire product organization. And it's working very well. I mean, right now we're managing to push these horizontal activities, and also product managers are able to do their job. One last thing that I learned from it is that the previous structure that we've had was very unique. So it's like a unique piece of software, right? When you have problems, you want to debug it, you don't have a lot of resources. I was trying to ask people, hey, I have this problem.
You can go to Stack Overflow.
Right, you don't have this Stack Overflow for engineering organizations, right? Where I can say, hey, this group doesn't work well with this group, how to solve it. But when we transition to the more classical structure, right, I have many people I can consult with, and they stumble upon the same issues that I'm stumbling upon right now. So it's much easier to solve this problem and gather knowledge about it.
You also said something that, again, I really like, that like organizational changes are like software. You always like want to, I don't know how you phrase it, like every 3 months you look into it, you say, am I doing things right? Where do I need to refactor? Do you think about that problem the same? Like about the...
I think about it as an optimization problem, not as a debugging problem, right? It's just a different profession, but yes, definitely.
No, I totally agree. I left my PhD in the middle, so I absolutely agree about optimization problems. But yeah, I definitely think that, sometimes we think about organizational structure as something that is very, hard to change, right? And I think it's much more flexible than you think. It's just about communication. I think in the process that we've had, we moved a lot of people. I managed 50 people. Now I manage 150. We closed some teams. We opened new teams that now solve the new problems that we face. And it's all about communication. We had a really good communication plan of what are the main messages that we want to convey, who are we talking to. We had a spreadsheet of all the people that are involved and who talked with whom and about what, and all the open issues. So it was handled like you deploy software to production. We had a deadline. It was managed really well, and I think it worked really smoothly. So yeah, to your question, I think that you need to constantly look at your organizational structure and see whether it currently solves your future problems, right? Like you said about hiring, right? You need to look ahead for the next 3, 6 months, year from now, and see, is this the best organizational structure that I have? And if not, try to modify it. I mean, our example was pretty drastic, but in many cases, you can do small tweaks, and over a period of time, it can achieve great results.
Continuous improvement kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I personally think that changes, apart from, adapting to what is currently, the requirement, I think it just injects new life into the organization. Change, it incorporates many feelings like fear and hesitation and what's going to happen with that, etc. But it also it brings new life. And one of my team leads, after we've made a very significant change, we moved a couple of teams to different managers, and I talked with him, and he said, "This is great. We really needed it because we need this change in order to have fun at work, in order to feel energized." So I think that other apart from being very good to business requirements, etc., it just injects new life to the organization. And I really liked also what you said before, about incorporating the engineering teams, along with the product team, along with the customers. I think that, for me, what is really significant about the good engineers, those that are the best engineers, is that they're not building software. They understand that they're building value for customers.
Exactly.
Technology is so fun, really. You can just dive into it. You can just get lost in it. I think it's a trap, and the good engineers, they know that we're not here for the fun part of software. We're not writing awesome scalable code in Python or Go, and we deploy it over Kubernetes, and this is so awesome. We create value for customers through the means of software. And I think for us this signifies, for me, they're really good engineers. This is their notion.
Yeah, so it's part of your culture, actually, right?
It is.
Cool. So we talked about personal journeys. How did all of you became leaders? And then how do we scale the team? And we heard great views. Do you remember when you had felt for the first time, hey, this is what we built is people are using it, they're loving it, all of a sudden there's like tons of downloads?
Yeah, so for us it was actually pretty early in the game because when we started Lightricks, we actually we were 5 founders and we said, hey, we're going to work a year and a half on something, no matter what. So we're in this game together. Thankfully, the first project that we worked on, Facetune 1, was really successful. We were a bootstrap company, so it was in 2013. We were just, we left the university, left the PhD, so we were a few years in the university, not a lot of cash in the bank, so we had to succeed in something, and no funding. So we worked in the garage in 2 different apartments, 2 guys in one apartment, 2 guys in the other, like 250 meters apart. And after 6 months, we released Facetune 1, and we sent it to the App Store. And again, no article in TechCrunch whatsoever because we had no funding. No one knew who Lightricks was. And on one Thursday, we got a call from a blocked number. And actually, our CEO got this phone call. He was in the BJJ practice, so we couldn't answer. Eventually, we figured out that it was Apple saying something like, hey, you need to send us a banner that we don't usually request and just change the name of the app to just Facetune and not other App Store optimization keywords afterwards. So we guessed something is going to happen. And eventually we became the #1 new noteworthy app that week. So we started seeing downloads, and I think the amount of dopamine that was in my brain for the next 7 days was just insane. It was better than any drug you can imagine. So we just continuously refresh the analytics, like seeing users using the app, starting seeing money, and it was really crazy. Like the best validation that you can get for product market fit, at least in the beginning. And still, it's something that it's one of our mottos to this day. I think there are a lot of startups who measure themselves only by growth in number of users, and they actually don't have any ARR or revenues. We had to make revenues from day one because we were bootstrapped for 2.5 years. So still to this day, we measure our value as the revenues that we make. We think it's the best proxy to user value.
Super interesting. Amir, like selling to the enterprise, is that like a similar experience? Probably not as like when consumers like all of a sudden like tons of downloads, but do you remember that moment where you said, okay, a product now, people use it, they love it, they understand the value it gives them? Yeah,
so there are a lot of stories like this. There are certain stories when you realize that you're currently in the production environment of Fortune 100 company, blocking and interacting with the entire production environment with all of the security devices in the organization, using and those security devices, they feed on the intelligence that we create. And there's this feeling that, oh my God, okay, so if I do a grave mistake right now, this company can really go down. So I really need to make sure that everything is okay. It comes like in phases. You see the first customers, and like everything's working, and then something breaks, and then as the scale grows, you really understand that you really need to take care of those things that are breaking because. Reality changes, and suddenly, all of a sudden, you serve the greatest companies in the world. And I think it also relates to this personal journey that you go as an engineering leader. Mm-hmm. I personally, I felt that every 6 months I had to like reinvent myself because it was different. Even though I worked for the same company like for the last 5 years. every 6 months it felt like a different company.
Different role.
Because you really need to adapt to the new reality. Different customers, different requirements, different business needs, different teams, different, everything changes. So you really must adapt. So for me, it felt like 10 different companies with the same people, great people, but you really have to reinvent yourself. And I think this is something that I feel actually until now.
I read this, I forgot who wrote it, but I read this post or article one time that the CEO of, like, I gotta find this, of a company, he decided that every new year he's writing the job description for himself. Because he said every new year it's like a different, and he checks, am I still the right person like to do this? Which is very brave, but it sounds similar like to what you're describing.